In 1999, only a few years after Swami Radhananda became the president of the ashram, she decided that Swami Radha's work needed to move out into the world. And up until that point, we had a journal called Ascent that was it was a small booklet, and it was published 4 times a year, and it went out to all of the people who knew us and who came here. And so this new Ascent was a magazine, and she invited a number of young people to be involved in publishing and producing it. So it wasn't the people who had lived here for years who were doing it. It was a whole group of young people, and she really wanted that young energy to be present in Ascent. And so the very first issue of Ascent magazine was on light. And Swami Radhananda wrote an article in the magazine, and I want to read this part of the article that she wrote tonight. She says, "One thing for certain, the light brings pressure. You might have the expectation that when you get to the point of feeling lighter, being lighter, life will be easier. But the light is bound to bring pressure. That's its job. Your faith will be tested. You may get into a painful situation or get despondent or depressed. Light will pressure you to question your life, your actions, and what has brought you to this point. If you cooperate with the light, it will give you the ability to see through your illusions. However, if you don't cooperate with your own evolution or ignore the light, things become worse. Look at your everyday situation. Is there tension, disagreement, conflict? The light wants something changed, so it will create this dissonance. This isn't a bad thing. It creates awareness that something has to be addressed. Will you just let it go? Avoid the situation? Would that be compassionate? You can ask for the light of understanding to reveal what you need to see in yourself, and it will happen. Reality takes on a different form. The light keeps breaking the illusions and bringing us to a subtler and subtler place inside of ourselves. It becomes the building block. Can you see what really is and not just what you want to see? Reality is always better than an illusion. So I've been thinking about my experience of the light invocation because it's been a practice I've been doing ever since I learned it. And my first memory of the light was I was living in Quebec, and I'd had cancer, and I was at home recovering. And I had this dream, and the dream was just light. It was brilliant, radiant, incredible white light. And I woke up and sat up, and I said to my husband, I just saw Jesus, because that was the only way I knew how to describe the experience I had. So it was like it knocked on my door and said, hey, here's a direction you can travel. So when I came to the ashram and was introduced to the Divine Light Invocation, it actually felt quite mysterious and difficult. And I used to get dizzy doing it. And part of that was because I had absolutely no powers of concentration. So I had trouble keeping my mind on what I was doing. But anyhow, that started to change. And I came and took the YDC. And early on in the YDC, the people that were teaching it said, why don't you think of a situation in your life that's not great, either the situation or a relationship, and put it in the light for the rest of the time you're here. So I did that. I had a friendship that was in great difficulty and lots of disharmony. So I decided to put this person in the light. I put her in the light every day, but the first time I did it, all I could see was this big black blob. And that was how I saw her. And it took me a long time, gradually every day, putting her in the light, for the blackness to start to disappear, and she began to emerge. And finally, at the end of the time I was here at the ashram, there she was. There was this person that I knew. And I realized that my mind and my emotions had made her into this oppressive, dark thing that I couldn't relate to, I couldn't respond to. But the practice of the light took that darkness away. And then when I got home, I think it was her that phoned me up and said, let's go for coffee. And we went for coffee and sat in a kind of neutral cafe and talked. And it was totally without blame, totally without any emotion. We both talked about the experience. And it was finished. And it wasn't like, whoa, there was fireworks and light. And no, it was just this realization for me of what my mind and emotions could do in one direction and what they could do in another direction. So that was my first big learning from the Divine Light Invocation. The next learning was my mother. It was after the YDC, and I decided to do a practice of Divine Light for 40 days. And I was in the middle of this practice, and my cousin called and said, someone's broken into your mom's house and attacked her, and she's badly hurt and in the hospital. So I rushed. I was living in Lethbridge. I rushed out to Vancouver, and I was there for about 3 weeks, and really doing my practice of 10 lights a day, even more. It was very distressing and frightening, and I held on to the light as hard as I could. And my mom got through it and came home and was recovering, and suddenly I just felt totally disheartened. And I realized after a while, and I started questioning, like, why am I doing this? Is it for me? Do I want to keep going on this path? And then after a while, I realized that all these questions were because I had been doing the light thinking that I was creating this beautiful bubble around myself that would protect me and protect my family and keep everything okay. And that's not what spiritual practice is about. Spiritual practice is about what happened to me when I was with my mom in the hospital. It's what keeps us going in the hard times. And so that was another learning I received from the light. The power of support that's there. Not to make things nice, but to make things work. In 1982, Swami Radha opened a center in Calgary, and I moved there with my husband and another person. And the family who had owned the house that we bought had gone through some kind of tragic experience. And Swami Radha said to me, okay, do the light in every room, in every closet, open the cupboard doors while you're doing the light, fill this house with light, because it was very dark and there was a feeling of unhappiness. So all of us did that. We did the light all the time. We climbed into the closets and did the light. And quite soon, the house started to change and became lighter. So I highly recommend it to everybody. If you want to really house clean, use the light invocation. Some of you will know that our teacher, our wonderful friend, Swami Radhananda, has been suffering for the last few years with the progressive disease of Alzheimer's. And for the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of lights every day to support her on her journey, and also to support myself so that I can be a helper to her. And it's been quite remarkable to see in her the power of spiritual practice. So Swami Radha used to say that as we do spiritual practice, we're building up what she called a spiritual bank account. And it starts accruing interest after a while, so it keeps building and building. And that's what Swami Radhananda shows us, the power of that spiritual bank account. Because even though the disease has progressed, she's suffering from this disease, often it's been painful and very hard for her, very painful. And yet, there have constantly been moments of light around her, flowing out of her eyes, saying things. Lalitananda's over where she is now. She's in a center in Nelson. And Lalitananda said, the other day she was just saying, love, love, love. There's not a lot of words there, but the words that are there are the result of her spiritual practice. And so for me, this is the promise that she's showing to all of us. She's showing us how to live our lives in the light, because she is living her life in the light. And in her story, Carried by a Promise, fairly early on in her experience of the ashram and Swami Radha, I think it was when we did a life seal in Lethbridge, and she wrote, "Walking towards the light is the purpose of my life." She's fulfilled that purpose, and she invites us to do the same thing. We can all walk towards the light.